UK, but where it needs support, like on digitising prescriptions, we'll do that too. It's about working with the executive to improve patient outcomes.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Now, Mr Speaker, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland won't thank me for saying this, but whenever we're having these discussions about transformation of public services in Northern Ireland, you can either have good public finances or you can have an unreformed Stormont, but you can't have both. Now, with 3 parties in Northern Ireland supporting reform proposals in the last number of weeks, when is this government going to get serious about giving Northern Ireland the means in which to govern itself and get round the table and start discussions on reform of Stormont?
Well, those are conversations that are ongoing. We've had those. We had a Westminster Hall debate recently on there, and we'll have further conversations with party leaders. But I would also gently say that it can't be a substitute for improving services now. Improvements can be made. We've talked, myself and the Honourable Member, about cancer waiting times. We can do things now. It doesn't have to wait for conversations about reform as well.
Question, Robin Swan.
Mr Speaker, transformation needs to be embedded by a recurrent budget. We're 3 months into this financial year in the Northern Ireland political speed. We still don't have a recurrent budget. So what steps is the Northern Ireland office taking to bring about a recurrent financial budget in Northern Ireland?
Well, not only have we given a record settlement more than ever before in the history of the Executive since devolution, we're supporting the Executive, we're having discussions, we're encouraging them to set a budget so that the people of Northern Ireland can see the improvement in public services they really need.
Before we come to Prime Minister's questions, I'd like to pay tribute to former colleague Lord Alan Hazelhurst, who died this week. Although we come from opposite sides of the Pennines and the Isle, Alan served this House initially as the MP for Old Lancashire seat of Middleton and Prestwich from 70 to 74, before he represented Saffron Walden from 77 to 2017. He was also my immediate predecessor as Deputy Speaker and Chairman of Ways and Means from 97 till 2010. He was a distinguished and respected parliamentarian, serving on numerous committees during his time in the House, as well as playing a leading role with the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. Friends will know Alan was mad about cricket. Along my father Doug, they were prominent and long-serving officers of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on cricket. And I know Alan took his passion to the next level with his many novels about the sport. In 2018, he was appointed a life peer, served in the House of Lords until he retired at the end of 24. I'm sure members across the House will like to join me in sending our condolences to Lord Hazelhurst's wife, Lady Angela, his children and grandchildren, family and friends, who are very much in our thoughts today. We now come to Prime Minister's questions. Dr Ross Savage.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Question number 1.
Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I also pay tribute to Lord Hazelhurst? I know he will be deeply missed, particularly on the benches opposite. Mr Speaker, the findings of the recent Spring Hill inquest into the tragic deaths in July 1972 of Father Noel Fitzpatrick, Patrick Butler, Margaret Gargan, David McCafferty and John Dougal are sobering. While the circumstances in which the events occurred were undoubtedly challenging, it is the duty of the state to hold itself to the highest standard. The government accepts and deeply regrets these findings and recognises their gravity. On behalf of the government, I want to apologise unreservedly to the families for what happened and for the grief and trauma that they have endured since the tragic deaths of their loved ones. Mr Speaker, I also want to place on record our deepest condolences to the family of Lance Corporal James Freeman, who died in a tragic accident on Sunday. Mr Speaker, I'm also aware of a Royal Navy helicopter crash this morning in Devon. This will be a deeply worrying time for the families, and more information will be set out as soon as possible. Mr Speaker, Henry Novak's family have shown extraordinary dignity after their son's life was stolen in appalling circumstances. He was clearly a kind and thoughtful and much-loved young man. There are serious questions to answer, including how accusations of racism informed police thinking, and we're supporting the IOPC to get to the bottom of what happened. But no matter the pain we feel, there is no justification for more violence and disorder. The attacks directed towards police officers in Southampton last night were disgraceful and completely unacceptable. This is a time for serious work, not rage. And let me be clear, we will ensure anyone found engaging in disorder meets the full force of the law, as we have done before. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, in addition to my duties in this House. I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dr Ross Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to echo the sympathies expressed by the Prime Minister for those families recently bereaved, particularly the family of Henry Novak. Corruption appears to be endemic in donations to British political parties. We've had years of Conservative cronyism. We've had allegations of embezzlement in Scotland. We've had undisclosed donations from crypto billionaires and foreign oligarchs. We've even had freebies dished out to some of the honourable members sitting on the benches opposite. The government has already cracked down on some specific sources of donations that favour their political opponents, such as crypto and foreign money. Will the Prime Minister now commit to restoring the faith of the British public in the integrity of our British democracy by putting a cap on all political donations?
Well, can I thank her for her question? We will do whatever is necessary to protect our democracy from foreign influence and from dirty money. And that's why we commissioned the Rycroft review. We capped overseas donations and introduced a moratorium on crypto donations. And we're taking further action as set out in the King's speech. But the £5 million pound question still remains. Why is the leader of Reform dodging questions about his donations? And why did he keep it secret in the first place?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud that after decades, it is this Labour government putting passengers before profit by bringing GTR, Southern, Gatwick Express into public ownership. The previous government shelved plans to unblock the bottleneck at East Croydon Station. This not only causes delays from Bedford to Brighton, but leaves constituents at Norway Junction Station in limbo. So will the Prime Minister look again at the Croydon Area Modelling Scheme, back my campaign to unblock the Croydon bottleneck? And does he agree with me that by bringing our railways back into public hands, it is this government that is getting us back on track?
Well, can I commend her campaign to address the Croydon bottleneck? The last government cancelled work to address this. We will carefully consider the case for upgrades, including step-free access at Norwood. I'm proud that her constituents are travelling on rail services that are now back in public ownership and benefiting from the first freeze in rail fares for 30 years. Labour government transforming our railways and building a fairer Britain.
Come to the Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Bennell.
Mr. Speaker, can I echo the Prime Minister's words on Lance Corporal James Freeman and also about the Royal Navy helicopter crash in Devon? I also want to share my deepest condolences to the family and friends of Henry Novak. The circumstances around Henry's wrongful arrest and tragic murder must be a wake-up call to the entire country and our institutions that every life matters. And it is the responsibility of everyone in this House to bring people together, not divide them. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I would also like to take this opportunity to pay tribute to Sir Alan Hazelhurst, Lord Hazelhurst, who died on Monday. Sir Alan served Parliament for over 50 years, 8 of them in the Lords, 40 years as my predecessor as MP for Saffron Walden. And from 1970 to 1974, he was also the Member of Parliament for Middleton and Prestwich. He was respected on all sides of this House, elected multiple times as your predecessor, Deputy Speaker, before he concluded in the other place. Apart from serving his constituents, his greatest passion in Parliament and perhaps in life was, as you said, cricket. He was chairman of the all-party parliamentary group for cricket, a role which he encouraged me to take up and which I graciously declined, telling him I knew absolutely nothing about cricket. But I think colleagues should know that the reason Sky Sports can be found on the parliamentary TV network is because of Sir Alan's intense lobbying. There is so much to say, but I think just letting everyone know that he was a good and kind man, and he will be very much missed. My thoughts are with his wife Angela and his children Mark, David and Emma, and his grandchildren. So, Mr. Speaker, can I ask the Prime Minister, by how much has the welfare bill risen since he came to office?
Mr. Speaker, can I just first thank her for her approach and her tone in relation to the Henry Novak tragic case. In relation to welfare, Mr. Speaker, as she knows, we inherited a broken system from the party opposite, and we are now improving that system. Delivering a youth guarantee, rolling out 300,000 work experience placements, and commissioned Alan Milburn's review into youth unemployment. They're the steps that we were taken. As she will know, the number on welfare went up hugely on their watch, as did the cost under the Shadow Chancellor.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister doesn't seem to know the answer, so let me tell him. Benefits alone have risen by £20 billion since he came to office. The Prime Minister has promised welfare reforms, we heard him say it just now, so can he tell the House why was there no bill in the King's speech to reform welfare?
Well, Mr. Speaker, welfare reform is balancing universal credit so it no longer pushes people away from work. That's what we're doing. They voted against it. Welfare reform is introducing a right to try to incentivise people to take up opportunities. That's what we're doing. They voted against it. Welfare reform is providing record funding on apprenticeships. That's what we're doing. Apprenticeship starts fell by 40% on their watch. And she talks about the welfare bill. It soared to £88 billion, by £88 billion on their watch. Nearly 3 million people were written off. Face-to-face assessments collapsed because of the contracts they agreed, and the person who signed off those contracts was the Shadow Chancellor.
Mr. Speaker, we need to bring down the benefits bill. He complains about the Shadow Chancellor. The bill went up because of the pandemic. And even then, Mr. Speaker, even then, they were asking us to spend more. It's not the Shadow Chancellor who's the problem, it's the actual Chancellor. She's not even here in her place. It is the actual Chancellor. Mr. Speaker, the reason why there is no welfare bill is because the Prime Minister has given up. And he's given up because they have given up on him. On Sunday, the Welfare Secretary was asked 12 times on national radio if he would make cuts to the benefits bill. And 12 times he could not answer. So I will ask the Prime Minister, is he going to cut the benefits bill?
Mr. Speaker, all the measures we're doing to reform welfare, all the measures we're taking to get young people into work are measures to reduce the cost and the numbers of people who are unemployed. And, Mr. Speaker, that's why we've introduced the youth guarantee, so that young people can have help into work, that they can then, after 18 months, if they haven't got a job, be given a job for 6 months, supported, which we know is the best way to ensure that they succeed as we go forward. That is the change that we're making, Mr. Speaker. But they introduced the system that is broken. We're reforming it. Did they vote to reform it with us? No, they voted to keep the broken system.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister keeps saying he's bringing in welfare reforms. None of those things are going to cut the bill. Even his own Tim's review explicitly says, this is their review, this is in the terms of reference, explicitly says this is not about generating proposals for further savings. He had a chance to cut benefits, Last year, I remember they were planning to cut benefits, and on the floor of this House, they U-turned. What did he do when he had a chance? He caved. He caved to all these MPs behind him who don't want benefits brought down. That's why they're sitting silently behind him. So does the Prime Minister agree with his Welfare Secretary that that was the moment he lost his authority?
Mr. Speaker, I'm proud of what we're delivering on this side of the House. The fastest growing economy in the G7. They said that couldn't be done. Despite the war in the Middle East, the OECD forecast UK growth is up and inflation is down. Net migration, Mr. Speaker, net migration, which reached nearly 1 million under them, and the Leader of the Opposition was the cheerleader, down by a staggering 82%. The asylum backlog down by 46%. We're delivering the fastest reduction in waiting times in the NHS in the history of the NHS. That's on top of free school meals, free breakfast clubs and free childcare. And, of course, we're lifting 500,000 children out of poverty. I'm very proud of the work of this Labour government.
Mr. Speaker, he says he's proud of what they're delivering. I'm glad to see the Prime Minister still has a sense of humour, given we all know he's losing his job soon. He has no authority, and we know why. His MPs will not let him do anything. The Welfare Secretary said in private what they won't dare say in public. He said, "Every meeting I have with Labour MPs is about who can we tax in order to pay more benefits."
Shameful.
Last week, Tony Blair said, if the Conservative Party repeats its offer of working together on welfare, Labour should accept. So today, I am repeating that offer to the Prime Minister. Is he ready yet?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, they introduced a system that's broken, and they put the bill through the roof, and now they want to give us advice on welfare. No thanks. No thanks. The question should always be not what benefits people are entitled to, but what help we can give people to change their life. That's what the Work and Pension Secretary was arguing, and he's right about that. And it's a Labour government that's helping people into work. And she asked what we've done. She asked what we've done. More rights for renters, stopping unfair rent strike. That's 11 million people given greater security and a place to call home. More rights for workers, Mr. Speaker, including bereavement leave on day one. Ask anyone who's lost someone and they'll tell you just how important it is to have bereavement leave, and lifting 500,000 children out of poverty. We often say in this House that every child should go as far as their talent or ability will take them. It does not happen if they're growing up in poverty. And the party opposite have fought us every turn. I'm proud of what we're delivering. There's much more to do.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is, unemployment has risen every single month since they came into office. You can listen to their cheers get weaker and thinner with every passing moment. The fact is, despite his huge majority, the Prime Minister doesn't have the votes to reform welfare. There is a solution, a Conservative solution. Benefits bill down. Oh! Mr. Speaker, they're all jeering now. I don't know why they're supporting him. He is more than happy to release all their text messages while all of his has disappeared. Disappearing messages from a disappearing PM. There is a Conservative solution. Benefits bill down, taxes down, growth up. Everyone in this House knows that he is just a caretaker, keeping the seat warm for the Mayor of Manchester. But it doesn't matter who's in charge. Labour MPs will keep asking who can they tax to pay more benefits. It is in their DNA. Isn't it the truth, Mr. Speaker, that the problem isn't this passive Prime Minister? The problem is the Labour Party.
Forgive me if I don't take too much notice of the Leader of the Opposition. For 14 years, they broke our welfare system, lost control of our borders, presided over the biggest fall in living standards on record, broke the economy, prisons, the NHS. I could go on and on. No wonder she and they are totally irrelevant. The change delivered by this Labour government, the biggest upgrade in workers' rights in a generation, delivered. Renters' Rights Act, delivered. Record funding for our NHS, delivered. The fastest growing economy in the G7, delivered. Lifting 500,000 children out of poverty, delivered. We're going to fight even harder for working people, a stronger and a fairer Britain.
Mr Speaker, 97 homes in Colsnaughton have been evacuated due to ground movement. That's hundreds of people enduring severe emotional and financial distress. This is absolutely life-changing. The MRA are now conducting an 8-week investigation into who will ultimately be held responsible. In the meantime, my constituents are looking to the UK Government for help. Will the Prime Minister commit to working with the Scottish Government and Clackmannanshire Council to ensure that affected residents receive whatever support they need for a speedy and fair resolution?
Can I thank my honourable friend? And I do know how difficult it is for residents who are not in their homes. And can I reassure him and them that the MRA are carrying out daily investigations to get answers as swiftly as possible. We're also working with the Council to provide support for residents. I can confirm the Energy Minister is in touch with MSPs and will ensure that both my honourable friend and his constituents are kept updated on the next steps.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And can I associate myself with your remarks about Lord Alan Hazelhurst and confirm to the Leader of the Opposition that he will be missed on all sides? Can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about Lance Corporal James Freeman, who was killed in Iraq? Our thoughts are with the family and the unit. And can I also offer our thoughts and prayers to the family and friends of the 17 people who tragically drowned during the recent heatwave, many of them children. Mr Speaker, the murder of Henry Novak was an evil crime made much worse by the lies of the killer and the police response. The investigation must uncover all things that went wrong, and all police forces must act on its conclusions. Outside court, Henry's father made a powerful plea that his son's murder should not be used to create further division, but should be used to treat knife crime as a national emergency. Does the Prime Minister agree that the victims of knife crime and their families deserve a politics where we come together to solve these problems and not use them as a political football?
Can I first join him in paying tribute to the 17 people who lost their lives in the heat wave, many of them, as he says, young, and each of them tragic, and send our condolences to their families. In relation to the case of Henry Novak, can I thank him for the approach that he has taken in this as well. It is important in a case like this, which is so tragic, and anybody who's seen the footage will have been deeply moved by it. It is important that we reflect on our own leadership roles here as political leaders. And it is our duty to bring people together at a time like this, not seek to divide people. It is particularly our duty to listen to what the devastated family are asking of us as political leaders. And can I thank all of those that have acted in that way, because I think that's the right way to respond.
Sir Ed Davey.
Can I thank the Prime Minister for his reply and completely agree with him and say that we stand ready to work with the government on serious policies to tackle knife crime. Mr Speaker, with our armed forces overstretched, Labour now seems to be investing in a new weapon of war, the long-form essay. It gives another meaning to the phrase drone warfare. Tony Blair says the UK should suck up to Donald Trump, kowtow to US tech barons, and go slow on Europe. The Prime Minister must be grateful for this rare endorsement of his agenda. Blair also claims that the sensible people aren't radical and the radical people aren't sensible. Is the Prime Minister concerned that unless he changes course, he will be remembered for being neither radical nor sensible?
Well, he rather spoiled what was quite a good gag. Mr Speaker, I have to. I'm surprised he hasn't done more to welcome the savings we're delivering for Family Fun Days Out this summer. I really thought that he would have been delighted at the cheaper tickets for soft play.
Speaker, the country is united in its horror at the tragic death of Henry Novak. And would the Prime Minister once again join me in paying tribute to the courage of Henry's family in the face of this tragedy? And will he also join me in calling for the recognition of the serious mistakes made by the police, and that we must learn from those mistakes so that no family may face this tragedy again?
Well, can I thank him for raising this really important case? And my thoughts are with Henry's family. I'm sure the thoughts of the whole House and the whole country. I have watched the body cam footage, as others will have done. I found it really hard. It was harrowing. As a dad of a 17-year-old boy, I felt sick. I can only imagine how devastated his family are. It is extremely moving. Henry's life has been stolen. His family have responded with incredible and immense dignity and bravery. Now, there clearly are lessons, Mr. Speaker, that need to be learnt, serious questions that need to be addressed, not least this question of our accusations of racism informed decision-making in such cases. Henry's father said this: "We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred, or tension." They're the words of a grieving father who's lost his son. We do not want his death to be used to create further division, hatred, or tension. I think those words have resonated with people across the country. We must not allow this tragedy to be hijacked by anyone who seeks to divide us.
Nigel Farage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the horrendous circumstances of Henry Novak's death, can I urge the Prime Minister to consider this? It is now clear to growing millions in this country that we're living under two-tier policing. The instructions that are given to police officers from police bosses are clear and written down in ink. It says you must treat different ethnic groups in different ways. That, apart from the upset and the anger at the circumstances of his death, the anger that you saw spilling out in Southampton last night, and which is in danger,
condemn the violence,
which is in danger of getting considerably worse, because if the public lose trust,
condemn it.
If the public lose trust in being treated fairly by the police, can he take some action, end this divisive practice of two-tier policing, and make sure that all British citizens are treated the same?
Mr. Speaker, I don't believe there's two-tier policing in this country. I'm really shocked that he pretends to have respect for Henry's family and then acts in this way. They are a grieving family.
Mr. Blash, please. It's a very important question. I want to hear the Prime Minister. If you want to carry on, go outside, please, Prime Minister.
The grieving family have asked us not to respond in the way that the Leader of Reform has responded. They've asked us not to. They have lost their son in the most appalling circumstance. They make a simple plea of us as human beings to please not exploit that. That is their plea to us. We all need to reflect on those words of Henry's father. My response, and the response of others, to be fair, has been focused on the lessons to be learned so we can deliver justice. His response has been to appeal for rage. Rage. That's his response to a father who's lost his son, and ask for that not to happen. Exploiting this tragedy to create grievance and division would be wrong in any circumstances, but to do it when the family are expressly saying, please don't, is unforgivable. It shows exactly who he is.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to echo the comments that the Prime Minister has just made. Absolutely. In August 2024, my constituent, Holly Woodcock, was found deceased in France, aged 20 years old. Her parents, Lee and Joanna, who are in the gallery today, still have no idea what happened at Holly's friend's holiday villa. They have raised significant concerns with the Foreign Office regarding the investigation, including the inconsistencies of witness statements and timelines, how samples were prematurely destroyed, and how matters raised by French lawyers were dismissed by the investigating French police officers and officials. I'm grateful that the Foreign Office Minister met with me and Mr Woodcock, but I share the family's concerns that our government should do more to press the French authorities to reopen the investigation. So will the Prime Minister commit to look at what can be done to raise this matter with his French counterparts at the highest level to help Mr and Mrs Woodcock get the answers that their daughter Holly deserves?
Can I thank him for raising this case and express my sincere condolences to Holly's family? I cannot begin to imagine the intense distress that they've experienced. My honourable friend will know the Ambassador to France has raised Holly's case with the French Prosecutor General, and I know the Minister of Europe has set out further steps that can be taken and is ready to support the family. But I will reflect in light of this question on whether there's anything more that can be done.
Liz Saville-Roberts.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Lefarydd. Last month, Welsh voters elected a Plaid Cymru government with a clear message, fairness and hope. This means tackling years of neglect by securing funding owed from HS2, a new financial settlement that reflects our nation's needs, and more powers for Wales, especially powers over our natural resources. So would the Prime Minister be open to turning a conversation into real action to fulfil the democratic wishes of the people of Wales? Because now surely is a time for us to work together rather than facing the chaos that threatens us from every corner.
Can I thank her for a question? As she, I hope, knows, I did have a call with the First Minister of Wales just 2 weeks ago and made it clear that this government, will work constructively with the First Minister and with the government in Wales, because that's the right thing to do to deliver for Wales.
Tristan Osborne.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Can I ask the Prime Minister about our National Health Service and what better treatments can we offer people suffering from memory loss? A very distressing case was recently brought to my attention by a constituent in Waldham, in a village in my constituency, of a man who could not remember his own words, even though he said it on television, that the NHS should not be funded through general taxation. What can we do to ensure my constituents in Chatham and Aylesford secure clarity on future Kent and Medway NHS funding, and what can we do to help the leader of Reform UK?
Well, my honourable friend makes a powerful point. The Reform leader wants everyone to forget that he called for our NHS to be replaced with an insurance-based system. He might want to jot it down to jog his memory. And then he said that if people can pay, they should pay for NHS treatment. So we can help him by jotting his memory here. You cannot trust reform with our NHS. The only way to protect it is to vote Labour.
Rosie Duffield.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. This week, Tom Carriage and UK Hospitality launched their That's the Problem campaign. And yesterday, my neighbour from Herne Bay and I hosted industry bodies, chefs Matt Tebbett and Thomasina Myers, hospitality leaders from Manchester, Liverpool, London and Kent, including Andy Burnham's nighttime economy advisor, Sacha Lord. All agree with campaigners such as Andy Lennox that the UK's rate of 20% of VAT in hospitality is killing businesses daily. Does the Prime Minister agree that that's the problem? And will he match his candidate in Makerfield's pledge to slash VAT in line with the rest of the EU?
Can I thank her for her question and recognise the challenges that she identifies? That is why we're permanently lowering business rates for retail, hospitality and leisure businesses. Every pub will get 15% off its new business rates bill, and bills will be frozen in real terms for a further 2 years. In relation to VAT, she'll see that we are supporting, by cutting VAT on children's meals in restaurants, particularly over the summer period, with the savings that were set out 2 weeks ago by the Chancellor.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Every year, around 160 university students commit suicide. That's more than 3 every week. Yet there is no established duty of care on universities to protect the health, safety and welfare of their students. This is not about creating excessive burdens on universities, but requiring them to take reasonable steps to prevent injury or harm to their students where the risk is reasonably foreseeable. So would the Prime Minister please meet with me to discuss this issue so that we can do all that we can to prevent our young people dying at university through suicide?
Well, Mr. Speaker, any death from suicide is a tragedy, as everybody across this House will know. We're bringing together students, bereaved families, universities and the NHS to strengthen the mental health support provided to students, and we've appointed a student support champion to drive improvement across our universities, and the Minister will be happy to discuss that and other matters with him.
Andrew Rossen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if the Prime Minister has had the chance to study the election results in Havering, with 0 Labour councillors elected in Romford, 0 Conservative councillors for the first time since 1964 across Havering, and the first Reform UK London borough, which shows people's disillusionment with the political establishment. But in his final days as Prime Minister, does he think he can do something for the people of Romford and give us the accident and emergency unit at Queen's Hospital, which the honourable member for Ilford North said he would deliver but failed to do?
Mr. Speaker, we put record investment into the NHS to clear up the mess that he and others left behind. I have studied the candidate for Makerfield, the Reform candidate, since he brings up election, a self-professed sexist, said women who get abortion do it for vanity purposes, encouraged people not to get the COVID vaccine, and said Russia would within its rights to invade Crimea. Reform have got nothing to offer but grievance and division yet again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's comments on Henry Novak and cause for calm over division? The Rugby League family lost a giant last week. John Keir, the former England, Wales and Challenge Cup winning coach, died suddenly on Sunday afternoon on his journey north after commentating on the Challenge Cup finals at Wembley the previous day. After playing for Castleford, his local team, he moved to teaching and coaching for a total of 700 matches with 9 clubs, including famous underdog Challenge Cup wins with Sheffield Eagles in 1998 and Hull FC in 2005. John loved his sport and was in love, and in turn was loved by the sport. Will the Prime Minister join me in paying tribute to John and sending condolences to his wife Dawn, family and friends?
Can I thank her for raising this and pay tribute to John? We're all deeply sad to hear of the passing. He was a remarkable athlete, coach, and an energetic and enthusiastic champion of his sport. He will be missed by supporters across the country. And I think my thoughts, all of our thoughts, are with his wife Dawn, his family and his friends at this sad time.
Sarah Green.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday I spoke to women at an event here in Parliament whose children suffered avoidable harm after they continued taking the epilepsy drug sodium valproate during pregnancy. Doctors knew the risks, patients were not informed, and it's had devastating consequences. I'm sure the Prime Minister would agree that for a government department to commission a report looking at how to provide a redress scheme, it raised an expectation that one was on the horizon. To then not introduce it would be unbelievably cruel. So when will this government respond to the Hughes report and finally establish a redress scheme for these families?
Can I thank the honourable member? We absolutely recognise the harm and huge impact that pelvic mesh has had on so many lives. She will be aware that the Minister of Public Health has been a dedicated campaigner on this very issue. I want to see a full response to the recommendations published as quickly as possible, and I'll make sure the Minister keeps her updated of progress.
Ewan Steinbach.
Mr Speaker, the 10-year bus plan published by the Department for Transport shows that demand for zero-emission buses will double by the end of the decade. Despite this, in Scotland, jobs are being lost in our bus manufacturing sector because overseas manufacturers are winning a greater number of orders and now constitute the majority of new registration buses on our roads, despite an investigation into the cybersecurity of Chinese buses. Will the Prime Minister designate bus manufacturing as a sector critical to our national security?
My honourable friend is right to champion the brilliant, talented workforce building buses in Scotland. Our pipeline will give UK manufacturers the certainty and stability that they need to plan ahead and to be completely effective. And I can reassure him we're working closely with the industry to provide the response and the support that's necessary.
Bob Black.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And I welcome the Prime Minister's commitment to combat anti-Semitism. But the regular hate marches we've seen on our streets, with the chanting of globalise the Intifada, has led directly to attacks on Jewish businesses, on synagogues, on individuals in the streets, and now an arson attack on where Jewish people live. So the Jewish people of our country now want to see action, not warm words. Will the Prime Minister therefore commit to the type of action that we need to expel students who commit anti-Semitic acts who are from overseas? Will he take action to prescribe the IRGC? Will he take action to close down the 13 Iran-sponsored charities in this country that spread anti-Semitism? Will he also take action to ensure that all children are taught the horrors of the Holocaust, the importance of not expressing hatred towards one another, and the true history of the founding of the State of Israel? The Jewish people of this country want to feel safe on our streets and in their homes and in our country. So will the Prime Minister take the appropriate action?
Can I thank him for his question? And we are united in our belief that we must fight the poison of anti-Semitism wherever it is found. We are investing more to keep Jewish communities safe, more police patrols, greater security at schools and synagogues, and investing £7 million to tackle anti-Semitism within our universities, and bringing in prescription-like powers to clamp down on malign state activity. We will set out further steps in coming days, and I'll make sure he's fully informed of the steps that we're taking.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, less than 48 hours ago, the family of Henry Novak stood on the steps of Southampton Crown Court and gave a courageous and dignified statement in which they said, "We want to use Henry's heartbreaking story to make change for the better. We do not want his death to create further division, hatred or tension. We want his story to help make our streets safer for everyone." Does the Prime Minister agree with me and my constituency neighbour in Southampton Test, Satvir Kaur, that the violence we saw whipped up on the streets of Southampton last night, the criminal damage to innocent people's homes, the injuries to 11 police officers, are the total opposite of what Henry's own family clearly and powerfully called for?
Can I thank him for his question and thank him for the discussion that we had this morning about the impact in Southampton, and thank him for the work that he has done along with his fellow MP and, if I may, the Honourable Member for Thurrock, who's been dealing with Henry's family for some time. The attacks directed towards police officers last night were disgraceful and completely unacceptable. There is no justification for further disorder.
Danny Chambers.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And the Conservatives promised us 40 new hospitals repeatedly that we knew were never going to happen. But the current government is now promising us a new hospital in Hampshire in 20 years' time if it gets built at all. Mr Speaker, my constituents really rely on our A&E maternity services, but our current hospital has a huge repair backlog and it has rainwater leaking into clinical areas. Will the Prime Minister please break this cycle of governing parties promising us hypothetical hospitals and simply commit to fixing our actual hospital in Winchester?
Can I thank him for his question? I recall he raised this with me, I think, previously at Prime Minister's questions. As he knows, the reorganisation of services is a matter for local integrated care boards who take decisions based on the evidence and engagement with patients. Across the country, patients are benefiting from the £450 million investment that we've provided to expand urgent and emergency care capacity. That's the improvements because of the investment we put in, but it is a matter for his local board.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite the efforts of dedicated teachers in Scarborough and Whitby, only 36% of pupils achieve grade 5 and above in both English and Maths GCSE. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that Mission Coastal has the potential to deliver the same transformational impact for young people in deprived coastal communities as the London Challenge achieved, and is the kind of bold and targeted intervention that only a Labour government can deliver?
Can I thank her for her work championing on such an important issue? Mission Coastal will help break the link between background and success, giving the most disadvantaged children mentoring, career support and enrichment opportunities, because we believe that no matter where you grow up, every child deserves the same opportunities to succeed.
Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This government's top-down housing targets, which are about to almost double in my constituency, mean communities like Redbourne and Tring are about to see huge-scale development while infrastructure is bursting at the seams. But while a supposedly affordable new build in my patch is more than £500,000. So no wonder Hannah, one of my sixth formers, says she can never dream of buying a new home and have to leave the place where she grew up. So will the Prime Minister urgently review these targets and come and speak to Hannah and our constituents, see how the targets, these top-down targets, are not delivering the affordable homes, the services we need, or protecting our precious land?
Prime Minister, please.
Look, we inherited a housing crisis with people unable to have the security of their own home or even get onto the housing ladder. We are determined to change that. We have invested £39 billion to deliver more social and affordable homes, prioritising brownfield land. We must build more communities with strong infrastructure, but her party consistently votes against the planning reforms that will actually allow those homes to be built.
Final question, Calvin Bailey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Yesterday, the Health Secretary confirmed that all eligible black men will be invited to the Transform trial. As chair of the Prostate Cancer APPG, I welcome this vital step towards screening for this terrible disease, for which black men have doubled risk for both diagnosis and death. Something which Reform have responded to with nothing but divisive weasel words and rage baiting. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that our NHS was founded by Labour to be there for everyone equally, and when there is a proven higher risk, targeting support is equality?
Can I thank him for his work as chair of the Prostate Cancer APPG? This programme is England's first targeted cancer screening programme. We're also funding a major expansion of research and treatment backed by £20 million to help men at the highest risk. We are determined to improve cancer care, and more cancer patients are now being diagnosed on time thanks to Labour's decisions. But of course, there's more to do.
Let the front benches change over. Didn't ask a question, so questions come after statements. You didn't ask a question, though. I don't know. We now come to the urgent question. Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am most grateful. Mr. Speaker, would the Secretary of State for the Environment make a statement following the disruption of water supplies throughout the area served by South East Water during the spring recess?
Aldi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to Sir Roger for asking this question. And I'd like to update the House on the water supply disruption in Kent I'd like to begin by expressing my sympathy for those affected by this disruption. Being without water is distressing at any time, but particularly during a period of hot weather and school revision and examinations. This is now the third major outage affecting South East Water customers in recent months, and it is simply not acceptable. South East Water reported that thousands of customers were impacted by supply disruptions over the course of the incident, and I am pleased that normal water supply has now been restored. I met with the interim chair and senior operational staff twice during the course of the incident, including on Sunday this weekend, and the DEFRA team met with them daily to hold them to account for this incident and requested that they set out how they will compensate customers for this by the end of this week. Water supply disruption causes significant cost to businesses and impacts the most vulnerable in society. I've heard of a 100-year-old lady without water and a care home in Cranbrook using wet wipes to keep their residents clean. This is simply unacceptable, and the company must take urgent action. I'd like to thank all those working in the Kent Local Resilience Forum, the local authorities, the health and social care partners and civil servants in MHCLG and DEFRA for their hard work to support those affected. I'm also grateful to operational staff and volunteers who worked on the ground to restore water supplies and provide alternative water. A reliable supply of clean water is one of the fundamental foundations of a healthy, functioning society. The situation demands further bold action to deliver fundamental long-term reform, and that's why we're delivering whole-scale reform to the water sector. Through our Clean Water Bill, we will create a new, single, powerful regulator, giving us for the first time a clear system-wide view of company performance and the tools to intervene more quickly when companies fall short. We will put consumers first by introducing a water ombudsman, ensuring customers have a stronger voice and clearer routes to redress. We've already passed the Water Special Measures Act, which introduced the toughest Centrelink powers ever applied to law-breaking water company executives and introduced powers to ban unjustified bonuses. It is vital that South East Water and all water companies deliver on improvements to their infrastructure, but most of all, they must continue to improve their ability to maintain water supplies to their customers, whatever the weather.
We now come to Sir Roger Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister for her obvious and genuine concern and for the measures that she sought to take. And can I join her in thanking the very many organisations that sought to help us through this problem? And I include in that employees on the ground of South East Water. Mr. Speaker, you know that thousands of people in Herne Bay, in my constituency, and more thousands of people in Whitstable, in the constituency represented by my honourable friend, the member for Canterbury, were left without water during the 4 hottest days of the year so far. That is totally inexcusable and totally unacceptable. Not only were households disrupted, but at the very time when they should have been having a glorious start to their season, guest houses, hotels, restaurants, pubs were shut. Care homes had frightful problems. A doctor's surgery lost its consultations because they didn't have water. There is no quick fix to this. The Broad Oak Reservoir should have been built 50 years ago. It'll take 10 years if we start tomorrow. But we have to try to make sure that in the coming months, because there will be more hot weather, this doesn't happen for a 5th time across Kent. And Mr. Speaker, finally, could I say that I do believe that the water companies face a very real problem in the regulations as they stand. They are required by law to connect every new house to a supply. They are not consultees in planning applications. We have to correct that. They have to be given a voice because they cannot spirit water out of thin air.
Yeah, well done. Emma Haldane, Minister.
I thank the right honourable gentleman and share his outrage at the situation. And he's quite right to say that one of the answers is the reservoir, and he's quite right to say that it's going to take a long time in which to build it. But it's not just the reservoirs, it's the desalination plants, but it's also they need to do more urgent action on tackling leakage. Too much of the water that is produced is lost through leakage. We're also sort of looking across government at building standards for new homes. How can we make homes more water efficient? Because this is a big problem. And one of the things I hope which will offer him some some reassurances. NISTA have been doing some work around mapping to identify areas of the country where we have more acute water shortage problems, to look at what we need to resolve it. One of the things I was saying to the company is, like, what are the actions you can take now? There's no excuse for their poor communication. That's something they can fix overnight. They can improve their communication. They can improve their relationship with the local resilience forum. That doesn't cost any money. They can look at the bulk supply deal they have with Southern Water. That's another action they can take. They can accelerate their work on leakage reduction. That's another action they can take. But fundamentally, it's quite right. The answer is building reservoirs and having greater storage of water across our country. And it is, quite frankly, I think, ludicrous that we're in a situation where we complain about the rain all through the winter and complain about the drought all through the summer, and we have no way of storing it, and that's something I'm trying to change urgently.
Just to remind her, this is about South East Water, not other water companies, so I'm sure all questions will be linked to that. Sure, Sanchez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like many of my constituents, I have lost all faith in South East Water after the repeated failures to deliver adequate standards for customers in my constituency and across Kent. The latest incident left around 4,000 of my constituents having to cope for days with no water entirely, an intermittent supply or low water pressure. South East Water's failure to invest in infrastructure means I have no confidence they will be able to provide a basic standard of service. Moreover, they kept the hosepipe ban until February this year, and there was no preparedness for the hot weather that was coming up. So there is a lack of understanding for the senior leadership within that organisation. So what practical measures the government can do that we will not suffer in this coming summer months?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for his question and share with him the outrage of the situation, and he has been a fantastic champion for his constituents in raising this with me on a number of times. In terms of the action that they can immediately take, one of the things we've said to the company is that they need to be prepared for future hot weather during the summer. What is their plan? What is their resilience plan? What actions are they going to take? What are they going to do? You know, where can they identify immediate things they can take? The longer solution is the storage of water. That is the longer term solution. But I mean, fundamentally, I have to say, Mr. Speaker, this company is a water-only company. It has one job. That's all it has, one job, to supply water. And it's quite frankly astonishing that it is failing to do that at the moment. He will be aware they are under investigation from Ofwat, they're under investigation from the Drinking Water Inspectorate for its actual licence, and because of its recent credit downgrade, it is under investigation as to whether those licence conditions have been broken. So serious actions are being taken against this company now. I will, of course, update the House as soon as I hear more about the things they're going to be taking in the immediate short term. And just also to mention that the CEO has offered his resignation. The chair has already resigned. There is an interim chair, and the CEO is currently there while they're looking to replace him with somebody else.
Shadow Minister Dr Neil Hudson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for granting this urgent question from my right honourable friend, the member for Herne Bay and Sandwich. And can I thank the Minister for her approach and engagement with this vital issue. It is deeply regrettable, Mr. Speaker, that we are here yet again with unacceptable outages from South East Water following the events back in December and January. The shortage of water supply in Kent in these hot conditions has had terrible impact on the local communities. Homes have been without water supply, schools and businesses impacted, farmers and horse owners again fearing not having enough water for their livestock. Local residents have lost confidence in their water supply and are switching to bottled water. That simply is outrageous. These repeated failures are simply not good enough from South East Water. We have heard repeated accounts about poor communication and logistics from South East Water, including difficulties in accessibility to collect bottled water, compromising vulnerable residents. Can the Minister please provide guidance on what is being done to ensure that people can reliably, moving forward, access adequate supply, particularly vulnerable households? And what is being done to ensure vital healthcare delivery can continue uninterrupted? And in these hot conditions, what measures can be put in place so that farmers and horse owners will have enough water for their livestock? What meetings has the Minister had with South East Water, Ofwat, the Drinking Water Inspectorate, local resilience fora and affected councils since this latest disruption? Mr. Speaker, we've seen resignations at the top of South East Water, but we are yet to see any change in performance. What enforcement action is being considered against South East Water if it is found again to have failed its statutory duties? And what investment has South East Water committed to improve resilience in Kent, Sussex and other areas, and how will ministers ensure that it's delivered? Does the government accept that repeated water outages are unacceptable? And what steps will ministers take to support people in South East Water's area so that they will not face yet another period of interrupted supply?
I thank the official spokesperson. On the issue of farms, they did, after the last situation, which was raised with me, I think, by the Honourable Lady about, and yourself, about access for livestock. So this time they did make deliveries of alternative water to farms across the region during the incident. So that's what I've been informed. But obviously, if there's intelligence otherwise, I'm keen to learn and understand that. And they had said they continue to monitor farms at risk areas. On the issue of vulnerable customers, this continues to be a challenge. So one of the things I've been talking to the Cabinet Office around is there a way that we can share more accurate information and data? Because what the water companies say is keeping their priority register up to date is quite challenging, because sometimes people fall in and out of being vulnerable, classified as vulnerable. For example, a lady who's pregnant is classified as vulnerable and needing water, but obviously when she's had the baby, she's no longer classified as being vulnerable in the same way. So how can we maintain accurate records of who's vulnerable and who would need additional water? So I'm having those conversations with the Cabinet Office around, is there a way to share data, but bearing in mind it's sensitive about sharing information, so there's always a complication there. So one thing I would ask all colleagues to do, if we can try and encourage all of our constituents to identify, self-identify through the priority services register if they're classified as vulnerable, so that they can get the expected water. I've met with the interim chair, and we had a more productive conversation, and she is keen to reset relationship. She wants to sort of meet the MPs in the area, to talk to them. She's committed to sort of rebuilding a relationship with the local resilience forum and how they can improve communication. To be fair to her, I think she's been there a few weeks, so this is very, very early on in her interim chairship. So I think there's something that we can work on and build on, because there are things they can do now around communications, and I'm quite concerned by him saying there was an accessibility problem around drinking water stations. In terms of who I've obviously met with the new chair, met with the senior people involved, meet regularly with the Drinking Water Inspectorate and Ofwat on this. There are live investigations following the last incident being held into the company at the moment, and this will continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to my honourable friend for the way that she has approached this, and particularly the fact that she points out that South East Water has one job. However, unfortunately, they are accountable to their shareholders more than they are to the people who they are supposed to be serving. Can I make a suggestion, notwithstanding the reforms that the government has already put in place with regard to the water industry, suggesting that maybe in future, rather than simply fining these companies when they fail so catastrophically, taking that fine, the amount of that fine as stock in the company to be fully held by a locally convened water board, so that residents themselves have some form of control and accountability for the decisions that are made, because otherwise we are relying on extractive capitalism to destroy our water supply.
Minister.
My honourable friend makes a very powerful point, and I do want to highlight that in the white paper we did say in there that where water companies might want to transition to new ownership models, such as not-for-profit, for example, the regulator will develop a transparent process to assess whether that water company's requested move to the new model will go ahead. So we are looking at developing a transparent process if that is something that the water company might want to look at. But in terms of increasing the customer voice, which she's absolutely right about, on day one of this government coming into power, we announced new consumer boards for water companies. The Consumer Council for Water has done the entire country, gathering together different people for these customer panels. They've held one already in the South East Water area, where the customers there can count, very much like a select committee hearing, those water company bosses, and the report from that, obviously, I will share with the House, but is really interesting. The number one issue that came up from this area was communication. lack of communication and lack of adequate communication was the number one thing they can tackle. And that doesn't require millions and billions on a reservoir, that just requires competence.
Sarah Dyke, Liberal Democrat spokesperson.
Mr Speaker, leaving thousands of South East Water customers without access to drinking water has become a pattern of neglect, enabled by a water system that fails to hold water companies accountable for their actions, whether it be environmental destruction or consistent water disruptions. The situation is simply unacceptable, but the government's timid reforms do not rise to the scale of the challenge. We don't need more tinkering, we need a total structural overhaul. So given the repeated failures in water supply and sewage pollution seen in South East water area and across the country, will the Minister back Liberal Democrat proposals for a mutually owned public benefit model for water companies, focusing investment on the environment, on customers and infrastructure, rather than lining the pockets of water company bosses like South East Water?
Minister.
Of course, South East Water is a water-only company, not a sewage company, and I think there's many things we can criticise them for, but sewage pollution is not one of them. Since we came into power, as I said, on day one we introduced the customer panels. We've secured £104 billion private investment. We passed the Water Special Measures Act. We gave the EA more powers to monitor water companies and uncover wrongdoing. In fact, the EA have done over 10,000 inspections into water companies. They've uncovered 81 examples that have gone through to criminal investigation. And I do want to gently point out that under the previous government, coalition government, funding for the EA was cut by more than a half. We've also introduced criminal liability for water policies, introduced automatic penalties, reduced the burden of proof, introduced cost recovery, banned the sale and supply of wet wipes, looked at reforming our bathing waters, established the Water Delivery Task Force, and yes, there's more to do with the reforms we have. And on top of that, of course, we've abolished Ofwat. And on top of that, there is more work to do. But I think I stand quite proud on the record that we've already taken after years of inaction.
Helen O'Donoghue.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the honourable member for bringing this question. It's been an extremely distressing incident for my constituents served by South East Water on the Sussex-Kent border to see this disruption happening. Many residents and businesses impacted, and I have to say that it's right the Chief Executive and the Chairman of South East Water have resigned, and I would urge the government to look at the terms of the licence and whether those have been breached in this situation. But I also think we're here again in this chamber discussing another major water outage. The Minister knows we've had 2 major outages as well in my own patch. And what we see is time and time again the same mistakes and the same failures being repeated by the water companies. We looked at this on the Environment Committee and we found that they need to have clear plans of action in place, water stations in the right places, water stations that you can get to without a car, thinking about the impact on businesses and maybe delivering water to them to keep them open. All of these things every time get forgotten. And so could I ask the Minister to actually instruct all water companies in the country to have detailed emergency response plans in place for every constituency in the country that they work with the local MPs on, because we are the people on Christmas Eve, as happened to me last year, who've got the vicar's mobile numbers, the head teacher's phone numbers, and can set up those water stations, but they need to do that planning before disaster strikes and people lose water. So I urge her to look at that.
Minister.
Thank the Honourable Lady. So in fact, the licence, they have actually broken their licence conditions at the moment. Because of their credit, they've been downgraded by Moody's credit rating agency because of their performance issues, which is in fact, I think, the first time a credit rating agency has downgraded a water company over performance rather than over insolvency. So they are currently in breach of their licence. They're also being investigated on their licence from the drinking water inspector. It could be Ofwat. I will double check. Under the consumer duty, it is by Ofwat under the consumer duty for the fact that they've had supply outages in December and January. So that is happening right now. On the emergency response plans, yes, absolutely, they should have emergency response plans. Clearly, the emergency response plans that this company have are inadequate, which is why that we want to work with the local resilience forum and with the water company, obviously with DEFRA officials as well, to make sure that they are improved before we have another short spell of hot weather.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Honourable Lady asked a very good question, which the Minister sort of touched upon, but I'm going to press her further, because parts of Merryworth Platt and often in my own area were left not only without water, but without the support necessary for those who are most vulnerable, until 2 fantastic councillors, Matt Borton and Sarah Hudson, both from East Peckham, really went in there and got into the fight with the water company to make sure that the water station was set up. What planning can she help with to make sure that that infrastructure is put in place,
because the water companies have got away with it for far too long. In this case, South East Water, let's not beat around the bush, has been the worst run company that I've ever come across, and it's quite right that the leadership has gone. By the way, Mr. Speaker, there are quite a lot of companies I've come across, so that bar is set quite high. But she has extraordinary discretionary authority to corral and to coerce companies to act. Could she please look at bringing forward a task group within regional areas in order to make sure that their water plans are in place and their emergency plans are in place, because otherwise we're going to have this again.
I thank the gentleman for his thoughtful question. And of course, they do have a duty, they have a statutory duty to provide wholesome water. And if, in the event that they can't, they must include provisions of alternative water supplies. These are set out in the Security and Emergency Measures Direction for 2022. So they have that statutory duty to actually plan and prepare. I think that's a really helpful suggestion. I would want them to be working with the LRF to sort of look at this, because, I mean, in this case, it was just a water supply issue, but often when we have incidences, potentially if it's flooding that takes out water supply, it's more than one issue happening at the same time. So I think it's important that they work really closely with the local resilience forum. And what I can commit to do is contacting the company and the local resilience forum to ensure that they have those plans in place, and also recommend that they speak to the local members of parliament about those plans to ensure that they are that they are felt to be satisfactory, and of course, the councils for the local resilience forum to make sure that they are ready for, what will be another potentially hot summer.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Constituents of mine in Sittingbourne and Sheppey have been really, really worried and concerned as they've seen along the coast Herne Bay and Whitstable and residents there being deprived of their essential water supplies. I mean, it shouldn't have come as a shock. We know that there's been 15% extra usage of water during the heat wave the other week. But farmers in March and April were telling me locally that the water supplies were really, really low in the swales on Sheppey. We've got more investment coming, and it's really chalk and cheese in my area in the Swale, where we've got Southern Water and South Eastern Water. South Eastern are absolutely dreadful, whereas on Sheppey, which is particularly vulnerable to water supply issues, we've got a new water main coming, £4 million worth of investment there, and a massive new drainage system. It's really obvious the difference between these two companies. What I want to know from the Minister is, can she tell me how we're going to not just increase the amount of investment that's coming into the water system, but really deliver it at pace, and also how we can make sure that we don't have this postcode lottery in terms of whether you're going to get water or not, just because of the management of these firms.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend. And the issue of farmers and water supply, I'm really keen to make it much easier for farmers to set up on-farm reservoirs. That's something I've heard repeatedly from farmers, that they find it difficult. So I want to kind of make that as simple as possible. I've spoken to too many farmers who tell me their frustration, particularly in the Suffolk area, where they say all winter we send all the water out into the sea, and then all summer we wish we had it back. So I want to do something about that. In terms of drought, each company has been told to produce a drought emergency plan ready for summer. That's for every single water company, to make sure we are prepared for that. In terms of making sure they deliver what they promise, one of the things we did in the Water Special Measures Act is if they don't deliver what they promise, that money that they've taken to deliver it needs to be refunded to customers. That money has been ring-fenced, and we have the Water Delivery Task Force, which tracks all of the major projects to make sure they are on track and on budget, and if they're not, then we intervene as a government to understand why and what can be done to bring them back on track. But you're quite right, we shouldn't have this situation where because you live in a certain area you're suffering a much poorer service than if you live somewhere else. So this is why we want to take a bit of grip on the delivery of projects that should be delivered, but also kind of make it easier for people living in this area to be able to hold on to the water during the winter, to make sure that they have it during the summer.
Rosie Duffy.
Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Minister, who's been engaged for a long time on this issue, and I know she really cares and talks to me and my neighbours. My neighbours and I just spend far too much of our time talking about the latest water shortages, and heat seems to equate to lack of water in the taps. Whitstable has been devastated yet again, and we are really worried about too many new houses that aren't going to be able to meet demand, and also local businesses in the summer, like the excellent Nomad Pizza company that are independent and had to close for days during our tourism, hotspot. How can I reassure them? And most of my constituents, by the way, lots of them are very behind the nationalisation model. That's something I get a lot of emails about. But how can I assure them with our water tank 10 years, our reservoir 10 years from being built, how can I assure them that the tanks won't still be empty in July and August and we're going to suffer business-wise?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend, and that pizza business sounds great and definitely worth a visit in summer. But she's quite right. We need to be looking. So I said to the company when I spoke to them again on the Sunday evening, like, what are the immediate measures that you can put in place over this summer to make sure that we have enough water supplies. In terms of house building, I've had some really productive conversations with MHCLG about how do you build homes that basically use less water. You know, what is it in the building standards that you can build a home to mean that you're not having to use the same amount of water in a different way. This happens all over the world. It's not sort of beyond our grasp to do that as a government. But I think fundamentally we're going to need to build the reservoirs. We're going to need the desalination plants. We're going to need those big sources of water. But I do also think that, as I've mentioned before, one of the things, excuse me, the company could do more immediately is tackle the leaks, because at the moment we are wasting too much water into the ground.
Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in Dartford, like those across Kent, are also experiencing poor service and increased bills, including in Ebbsfleet, having to pay an additional sum for water to flow from their community, wastewater, into the Thames, a thing charged by the Port of London Authority called dewatering, which is incredibly unfair to them. What they ask me continually is why it's acceptable for this poor performance to be in place and for water executives to continue to pay themselves large bonuses. Can I just ask the Minister what work is going on in order to tighten the regulations so that reward actually matches performance going forward?
Yeah. Minister, please.
I totally agree with my honourable friend. As I've mentioned here before, I don't have an issue with bonuses per se. I just think it should be linked to how well you do your job. And what we've done with the Water Special Measures Act is obviously ban unfair bonuses. But what we have seen from some companies is they're attempting to exploit loopholes in which to continue to award them, and they're loopholes that we are determined to close.
Helen Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've had a few days of hot weather, and yet again in my constituency across Kent, we've had water outages on top of what we've seen earlier this year and last year. Residents, businesses, livestock owners, they are frustrated, but they are also really worried, because getting water is the most basic thing in this country. It's right that the Chief Executive and Chair of South East Water have gone. Yeah. My anger with them was particularly over their response and how they've handled these outages. But there is a longer-term problem of infrastructure and supply of water that's not going to be fixed overnight. There are pipeline for my constituency over the next few years and thousands more in the surrounding area. Can the Minister tell me, is there enough water for these thousands more houses in rural Kent?
Minister.
The Honourable Lady raises an important point. I remember last time we were here talking about South East Water, how powerfully she described the impact on her constituents and on her businesses. So I know this is something she cares deeply about. As I say, one of the things we're doing through the Water Delivery Task Force is identify areas of the country where there are more acute water shortages, and therefore what actions can be taken to ensure people have the homes they need to live in, but also businesses have the water that they need, and it's not having a detrimental impact on the existing residents that live in that area. One of the things particularly about South East Water is they are reliant on a bulk supply agreement with Southern Water, so that's one of the things I'm sort of keen to sort of look into the details of, to make sure that that can be guaranteed whatever the circumstances Southern Water found themselves in. There are various other actions we can take. We mentioned around businesses and building standards and the ways that you build homes. In Cambridge, they've looked at retrofitting some homes to make them use less water. There's various other rules and regulations when it comes to business use of water. At the moment, we have a slightly bizarre situation where businesses have to use potable water. They're not able to use other types of water, which seems a bit crazy to me, that we're wasting drinking water for things that aren't drinking or for domestic customers. So I think there's a whole spread of different things in which we're looking at to make sure that we have the water that we need, because quite right to say that all the 9 new reservoirs and the desal plants and all that are brilliant, but they're not going to be here this summer and they're not going to be here next summer. So it's looking at that more immediate actions that we can take.
And just gently say it was about South East Water. The Minister seems to have opened it up by mentioning other water companies. But if we can try and concentrate on the theme, will be more helpful. Otherwise, and I'm going to test that example by Clive Efford, who I think is Thames Water, but I'm sure we'll link his question.
Absolutely. I'm asking a question about South East Water because what we've got here is a company that fell over at the first short period of hot weather, and you have to wonder what planning has gone on in that company that it fell over so quickly in the season. And when are we going to call time on these water companies? Because the consistent failure that we get from them, whilst they're extracted enormous profits from the industry, has got to come to an end at some stage. I know my honourable friend is as frustrated as the rest of us with these companies, but it is time. There must come a time when we say to them, enough is enough, and we take control of these water companies for the public good.
Minister.
I thank my noble friend, and as highlighted, the white paper does talk about if companies wish to move into alternative ownership models. But I just want to sort of just briefly touch on special administration for breaching statutory duties, because under Section 37 of the Water Industry Act 1991, a water company has the duty to supply water within its area of appointment. A serious breach of these principal duties or of an enforcement order can be grounds for a performance SAR if that breach is so serious that it is no longer appropriate for the company to continue to hold its instrument of appointment.
Alison Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I absolutely despair of South East Water. As we've heard from honourable members who represent Kent constituencies, they can't cope with large water outages. Neither can they cope with small water outages. In my Mid-Sussex constituency, the village of Staplefield has just gone through 30 hours without water, without bottled water being supplied, without good information, and even with misinformation. I understand that trying to fix decades of neglect in the water infrastructure will take a long time. So can I ask the Secretary of State, in her next meetings with executives at South East Water, will she ask to look at their communication plans so people know what's happening, get timely information and get the bottled water they need, seeing as outages seem to be par for the course these days?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady, and she's absolutely right. It was one of the issues that we had in the conversation on Sunday, was that issue around communication and where bottled water stations should be. I was told in this incident that they'd work more closely with the LRF to listen to their advice on where to place them, but obviously if that's not the Honourable Lady's experience, then I'd be keen to hear about that so I can take that back to the company. What I will say, because it is an interim chair, and I know that she's keen to build new relationships with members of Parliament, she has assured me that she's going to be meeting members of Parliament, and I think this is something collectively, this issue around communication, this issue around where bottled water stations is one that I would say urge to raise with her directly so that we've got them in the right place, because I think fundamentally members of Parliament and councillors know and understand their areas probably far better than a water company.
Matt Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and could I thank the member for Herne Bay for his question, and also the Minister's approach to this very difficult and appalling issue in Kent. Could she update the House and say a little bit more about the work to get meaningful compensation for the residents and businesses who are affected, and also in the longer term what she's doing to improve the system of compensation, which for many of my residents who had a water outage had to wait a long period of time for money to be paid back?
Wow. Minister.
I found my honourable friend, and absolutely one of the first things we did when we came into government was look at the Guaranteed Service Standards scheme, the GSS scheme, and we've introduced new increased compensation payments and introduced new standards, because previously there weren't even compensation being paid when people were under a boil notice, and that's something that this government's introduced. We've doubled for failings like supply interruptions, low pressure and sewer flooding, and so because of these changes, customers should be receiving payments for boil notice for the first time, and we've been told to make it available to people as soon as possible. We're really clear that customers come first. They are the people I care about, and they're the people I am the Water Minister for. So we're also going to be looking at introducing a water ombudsman. In the conversation I had with South East Water on Sunday, I asked them to, by the end of the week, identify what compensation is going to be paid to who and when, and that is something I'll be following up with them.
Dr Ben Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As she's looking into the situation with South East Water, can I also feed back what happened in Weybridge last week, where parts of Weybridge had restrictions of supply? While we're supplied by Affinity Water, I think this is a problem which is broader than just this area. Could you urgently review resilience of water supply, the availability, but particularly the impact new house building is going to have over the forthcoming years on supply?
Minister.
Thank the honourable gentleman. And on resilience standards, that's one of the things that we want to introduce for the first time is asset standards for water company assets, because at the moment these don't exist. There's no sort of rule or criteria for, well, what standard do you need to maintain your water treatment work to, or your wastewater treatment work to, or your pipes to, or how much leakage is acceptable or not. You know, that doesn't exist at the moment. So with the new regulator, we want to introduce these asset standards to say that you have to maintain your assets to a certain standard. And that should help change and basically build against what we've had in, not admittedly in this occasion they ran out of water, but what we've seen in other cases where supply, where infrastructure falls over because it's not adequately maintained and looked after, which is why the no-notice inspections really matter as well. Those MOT-style inspections, as I referred to them, where people from the Environment Agency can go in, no notice, check the assets, mark them on them, and then give the company enforcement notice to say that they have to improve their assets up to a certain standard. That's not going to be fixed overnight, but by having that goal and aim of where we need to get to will help to sort of prevent what we're seeing when we have issues where the infrastructure just falls over because it's not properly looked after.
Bob Lewis.
Speaker, South East Water is one of a number of privatised water companies that are responsible for setting off 35 reservoirs since 2017, and they haven't built a single one since privatisation that's complete. I think this government, we understand, is committed to a regulatory approach to dealing with this. I would say that's akin to putting a complaints box on the Titanic. A nice idea, but I don't think it's going to work. Ultimately, whilst you have private water companies whose first priority is to private shareholders, many of them overseas, who give a damn about our constituents, this will keep on happening until water is put back under public control in public hands and owned by the public.
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend. I know how passionately he cares about this, and I do genuinely pay tribute to him for championing this issue, for the work that he's done in Parliament to bring people together. As I have mentioned previously, the White Paper does talk about setting up a transparent process to look at transitioning into whether a company should go to a different model, which it mentions including not-for-profit, if that's what it would wish to do so.
Francois.
Speaker, can I just very quickly endorse your lovely tribute at PMQs, as I'm an Essex MP, to Sir Alan Hazelhurst, who will be much missed, even though he did achieve a very respectable innings of 88 years in his time on this earth. Can I very strongly endorse the suggestion from my right honourable friend from across the Thames, as it were, about making water companies statutory consultees for planning applications. Yeah. Where there's an application for a large number of houses, the implications can be severe, not just for fresh water, but for foul water, and particularly for sewage. And in my constituency, our sewage capacity is very nearly maxed out. And the implications of getting that wrong are frighteningly obvious. So I can see the Minister helpfully is nodding. Could we please change the law to make water companies statutory consultees so they can give expert advice on whether or not new planning proposals are actually feasible in reality or no?
Thank you. Hello, Minister.
The honourable gentleman's right in pointing out the consequences of getting this wrong. And just to reassure him, we are looking at, as I say, using tools from NISTA, using the Water Delivery Task Force, where we have shortages and what can we do about it. And not just for water, for wastewater capacity as well, because both are crucially important, because we want to see homes being built. We know that. We have, people want somewhere to live, and especially first-time buyers are finding it incredibly difficult at the moment. But we are taking a sensible approach to this and identifying, okay, where do we have shortages in wastewater or water? What can be done about that to increase the amount that we have available, but also what can be done to reduce demand in that area as well, as I mentioned, retrofitting and building standards and various other measures that can be taken too.
Terry Jeremy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy
Speaker. The DEFRA Select Committee has investigated South East Water extensively, and what I found particularly shocking was the fact that there were so many warnings and concerns raised that were simply ignored, and despite a high risk of water supply failure, the lack of preparedness was plain to see. So can I ask my honourable friend the Minister whether the regulatory reforms that the government is looking at will have real consequences when those concerns are raised but ignored by the water companies?
Minister. I thank my honourable friend and in fact all members of the EFRA committee for their report. I thought it was a really excellent report and quite forensic in looking into the failures of South East Water. So it was a really brilliant, useful document. And he's quite right that there needs to be tough consequences if concerns are raised and ignored, and they cannot be allowed to continue to happen. That is exactly why we want to give a new regulator with strong powers, with teeth, to be able to take action. It's why we're looking at introducing this performance improvement regime for water companies, so that if we identify failure in that water company, they're giving proper oversight to sort of turn that company around, make it improve, with consequences if they don't.
Sarah Bull.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Minister for her praise of the report. As a member of the EFRA Select Committee, we are doing extensive work on the water industry, and we are following this very carefully. As was said earlier, the key issue as part of the South East Water disruption was the lack of communication, and that equally applied to Anglian Water, with the outage that occurred at exactly the same time in South Northamptonshire. I was not told of the outage, and residents report not knowing what was going on for 12, 24 hours, and the water delivery was inconsistent. So what I ask is just whatever more the government can do to send a very clear message to the water companies that this lack of communication is not acceptable.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her work as well on the EFRA committee, and she's absolutely right. It is unacceptable. There are things, and I feel like I'm a fair-minded person. I know that they don't control the weather, water companies. I know that they can't build a reservoir overnight, but they certainly can. Contact their members of parliament, contact their councils, get in touch with their local resiliency forums, and make sure they communicate with their customers as an absolute bare minimum. And that is exactly the conversation and what I'll be telling each and every one of them.
Chris Inchley.
Madam Deputy Speaker, alongside the failures in the South East, there was a widespread disruption of water supply across swathes of my constituency during the recent heatwave in Buntingford, Cotterwood, Ardleigh and Throcking. And Madam Deputy Speaker, in a country as wet as ours, it should take a true organising genius to create disruptions in water supply, but we are on track for a 6 billion litre water deficit in our country in coming decades. And on top of this, the forecast for water consumption from AI data centres is now estimated to reach up to 500 billion cubic metres every year. So to prevent disruptions of water supply recurring year in, year out, will the Minister, who I deeply respect, accept that we cannot continue to have infinite increases in demand on our already vastly overstretched water resources?
Minister. I thank my honourable friend, and he's quite right. It is astonishing that we are going to be seeing with climate change wetter and wetter winters, drier and drier summers, but we have no capacity in which to store it in the winter and use it in the summer, and that just feels like an absolute nonsense. On the issue of data centres, one of the things I'm quite keen to look at, and I sort of mentioned this in an answer over there, is at the moment the way that the legislation is set out is that the water that is supplied by a water company has to be drinking water standard. So again, it feels a logical, sensible move to say, well, could you not, if you're using water for cooling purposes, not for drinking purposes, not in people's homes, to be absolutely clear, but could you not, if you're using it for cooling purposes, use a different standard of water? Why does it need to be drinking water quality? Because that would enable us to use water where we're wanting to use it for things like data centres, for growth in a closed-loop system. I think that's important to point out as well. But why couldn't you use something like wastewater to do the same job? Why do you need to use drinking water? And it feels that there was some legislation we have which were done for the right purposes. You know, it sounds great. A water company, of course, must have produced water that is drinking water standard. But does it need to be drinking water standard if we're using it to cool machinery rather than for people to actually use to drink?
The final question, Helen Brown.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. South East Water have openly and publicly admitted that they cannot supply drinking water for all the future homes planned to be built in Kent. So specifically, What is the Minister's response to that concern? And is she having conversations with her colleagues at the Department of Housing, Communities and Local Government?
Minister.
I thank the Honourable Lady for her question, and the short answer is yes. So the previous CEO, or the current CEO who hasn't gone yet, came to the Water Delivery Task Force a month or so ago, a few weeks ago, and with some of the local councillors from the area to talk about exactly this issue, the supply of water and the housing demands and how that can be met. And on the Water Delivery Task Force, I sit on that committee with MHCLG are there as well. So we're all having that conversation together, which was around how can we ensure that we build the homes that we need in a way that doesn't impact existing people living in the area and the water that they need, and in a way that ensures that those new homes have the water that's required. So we were looking at sort of over the next sort of 5, 10, 15 years, what are the various supplies of water that were coming in? How does that impact house building at that time? How can homes be built to a more water efficient design? So those conversations are happening across government right now to balance out that question of how can we make sure everyone has a home to live in, but how can we stop there being a water crisis at the same time?
That concludes the first urgent question. I'll give the front benches a few moments to swap over. Urgent question, Monica Harding.
Madam Deputy Speaker, would the Minister please make a statement on the Israeli Defence Forces operations in Lebanon?
Madam Deputy Speaker, before I answer the Honourable Lady's important urgent question, I'm sure the whole House will join me in condemning Iran's strike on Kuwait International Airport by drones this morning. This was a completely unacceptable attack, which has tragically resulted in multiple injuries and at least one confirmed fatality. We stand in full solidarity with the government and the people of Kuwait, as well as our partners across the Gulf. I've conveyed my condolences this morning to the Kuwaiti Foreign Minister and his colleagues. We urge Iran to de-escalate immediately and return to meaningful dialogue to secure lasting peace and regional stability. Turning to Lebanon, let me be clear. The reckless and disproportionate escalation of Israeli military action in Lebanon has resulted in a devastating situation for Lebanese civilians, killing thousands. At an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council on Monday, jointly called by the United Kingdom, we firmly condemned the government of Israel's actions and called for a genuine and lasting ceasefire. We also condemn Lebanese Hezbollah's ongoing attacks against Israel, including those on Israeli northern communities. They have faced a repeated barrage of missiles and drones. Lebanese Hezbollah is a proscribed organisation. At Iran's instigation, it has dragged Lebanon into a war that its government and its people do not want. It does not speak or act for the people of Lebanon. It must end these attacks and disarm. I condemn the recent comments by Hezbollah's leadership seeking to destabilise the government of Lebanon within their own country. In April, I visited Beirut to show our support for the government and the people of Lebanon. I saw the impact of this military escalation firsthand. In the south, on a previous visit, I saw the devastating impact on civilian communities, villages razed to the ground, and I was pleased to be able to hand over tangible support to the Lebanese armed forces. Since April, conditions for civilians have only worsened. Over 3,000 people have been killed, and over 1 million have been displaced, with civilian homes and infrastructure destroyed. We believe that 1/4 of the population of Lebanon is now displaced. Displacement means, Madam Deputy Speaker, families fleeing from their homes, not knowing what they will return to. It means ever greater strain on hospitals and clinics. It means civilians sleeping in tents by the roadside. It means thousands of children, some of whom I met, not being able to go to school, and the spread of disease even amongst the youngest. That is why a ceasefire properly observed by the parties is so urgent. Whilst in Lebanon, I also announced a commitment of an additional £20 million in humanitarian support, particularly for those displaced by the conflict, making the UK one of the largest international humanitarian donors to this man-made crisis. I also met President Aoun and others in the Lebanese leadership. His government is taking courageous steps, setting out an unprecedented commitment to tackling Hezbollah, and have made the case for direct diplomacy with the government of Israel. The people of both Lebanon and Israel deserve to live in peace and security.
I'm sure the Minister doesn't really need reminding, but he does have 3 minutes for an urgent question, and that overran by some time. I call Monica Harding.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It has become routine for Donald Trump to declare a ceasefire when none exists. And in Lebanon, the President's claim that fighting has ceased is a dangerous fantasy. Under direction from the Israeli Security Cabinet, the IDF is expanding its illegal military operations in southern Lebanon. Israeli forces occupy more territory in Lebanon now than at any point since the start of the century. Hundreds of shattered communities have been left in their wake, with over 3,000 Lebanese killed and 1 million displaced. This looks far too much like the IDF's operation in Gaza. Last week, Prime Minister Netanyahu said Israel would expand its control there to 70% of that territory, breaching the ceasefire there. There can be no doubt, Madam Deputy Speaker, that these actions have breached international law and likely constitute war crimes. Meanwhile, Hezbollah continues to target Israel with missiles and drones. Their violence has led to the displacement of Israeli citizens from across northern Israel and is completely unacceptable. There can be no place for that terror organisation in the region. No part of this resembles a ceasefire, Madam Deputy Speaker. We need to see concerted action from the international community, including the UK government, to bring this cycle of violence to an end. So I ask, does the government support the need for an immediate ceasefire in Lebanon? Is the government pressing the Israeli Security Cabinet to stop its illegal offensive and occupation in Lebanon? Will the government stop all arms sales to Israel and sanction Netanyahu alongside the extremist members of his cabinet? And has the government made any progress with partners to advance the multilateral plans for the disarming of Hezbollah? There is no military solution to the Lebanon crisis. The only path forward is a Lebanese political settlement that ensures Hezbollah's disbandment and full state sovereignty over all of its territory. Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm grateful to the Honourable Lady for the questions. We do, as I'm sure was clear in my answer, we do call for an immediate ceasefire. That must be meaningful. I commented in my response on the extent of civilian suffering, which the Honourable Lady is right to draw attention to. She is right also to highlight the vital importance of a rapid disarmament of Hezbollah, who are doing the people of Lebanon nothing but harm in their continued efforts to undermine the Lebanese government and to bring the Lebanese into a conflict that they do not wish to be a part of. I discussed those questions of disarmament in all of my discussions in April with the President, the Prime Minister, the Speaker of the Parliament, with members of the Lebanese Armed Forces, and we will continue to play our full role, including in the Security Council, as we did earlier in the week.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Emily Thornberry.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Instead of it being unacceptable that Israel invades and threatens the Lebanese people south of the Litani River, it long seems to have been understood that so long as they don't cross the river, then there won't be any particular consequences. It's as if we have our new modern-day Rubicon, and now they have crossed. And now we have Israel and Hezbollah fighting out their ancient hatred in the middle of a country and deliberately trying to destabilise Lebanon. It is completely unacceptable. When my committee visits the country this month, I expect that we'll hear many requests for more assistance to the Lebanese army so that they can make real progress in disarming Hezbollah and defending their people. Can the Minister confirm that such assistance is going in, and could he give us more details as to the plans?
Minister.
I thank the Right Honourable Lady for the question and her continued interest in Lebanon. I have been south of the Litani, and I have myself handed over watchtowers to the Lebanese Armed Forces in those very areas. And I wouldn't want the House to have any impression other than our view is consistent, both north and south of the Litani. I saw for myself from that watchtower the extent of damage done to civilian infrastructure, whole villages completely flattened. People said to me quite rightly, Madam Deputy Speaker, that their lives mattered in the south of Lebanon. They should not expect their villages to be flattened. They should not expect their children to be displaced. And I have been clear in all of our contact, both with the Israeli government and indeed with the authorities in Lebanon, how important it is that this violence is brought to an end. The Honourable Lady asks for a question about further detail. I can confirm we've provided over £175 million in training, equipment and advice to the Lebanese armed forces since 2009. There's been particular work in relation to Lebanon's borders, both against Syria and up against Israel as well.
Shadow Foreign Secretary.
Deputy Speaker, Lebanese Hezbollah is an Iranian-backed terrorist organisation who for too long have caused harm to the Lebanese people and undermined the government of Lebanon, threatened Israel and are part of a terror network that threatens our interests and security and that of our friends in the Middle East. There should be no doubt that Hezbollah continue to undermine efforts to secure peace in the region, and they failed to comply with the terms of the 2024 Israel-Lebanon ceasefire. Can the Minister tell us of his assessment of the actions taken by Hezbollah when it comes to violating the ceasefire and the support that they have received from Iran? Does he agree that the interests of peace are best served by Hezbollah being permanently disarmed? The current conflict has caused terrible hardship in Lebanon and Israel, and the UK government must use its influence and diplomacy in the region to help bring this to an end. We have to see this conflict come to an end. So can the Minister tell us what direct discussions have taken place with representatives in Israel, Lebanon and the US administration on the terms of a lasting ceasefire? What is the British government doing to support the disarming of Hezbollah? And what contributions and practical efforts are being made to see the UN Security Council Resolution 1701 fully implemented? So much of this leads back to the architect of so much of the disturbance in the Middle East, and that is Iran. And so I would just like to conclude my remarks, Madam Deputy Speaker, by joining with the Minister in condemning the strikes that took place today in Kuwait, and also the fact that Iran cannot carry on persisting in the way it is as a state sponsor of terrorism.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Shadow Foreign Secretary makes a range of important points, including on the enormous continued harm that Hezbollah does to the people of Lebanon, as indeed they continue to attempt to do to the people of Israel as well. It is completely unacceptable that communities in the north of Israel continue to face the barrages of missiles and drones that they do. We have called repeatedly for Hezbollah to stop. What they do harms Lebanon as much as Israel. We have discussed in detail with both the Lebanese armed forces and the leadership of Lebanon the progress that must be made in disarming Hezbollah. There has been a lot of commentary about both the phasing and sequencing of those efforts over the last few months. It must be the Lebanese government who disarm Hezbollah. That is the only way in which the Hezbollah issue can be properly dealt with. The government of Lebanon are brave and courageous people in whom we have very considerable confidence. President Aoun, who I was in contact with today, is taking very, very important steps to try and safeguard his country and its future, and we must support him. He and his government and his armed forces must monopolise force in Lebanon, not Hezbollah and not the IDF.
Abdissam Mohammed.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 125 health workers have been killed in Lebanon just in the last 3 months alone. Today, an Israeli strike has hit an ambulance in South Lebanon, killing 2 paramedics, taking the death toll now to 127. The November 2024 ceasefire agreement is barely worth the paper it is written on. The Minister rightly condemns the targeting of civilians. What about Israel's targeting of health workers, of journalists? And does the Minister realise that condemnation without action has utterly failed and reinforces Israel's continuing disregard for international law? So will the Minister today make clear that sanctions must be used to hold Israel accountable?
Minister.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend who has been a persistent advocate on these issues. We have taken a whole series of steps, Madam Deputy Speaker, which I want to set out in brief for the House. So important are the issues in Lebanon that during my visit in April, we went from providing only £10 million of humanitarian assistance now to 30. We are now one of the largest humanitarian donors in the world to Lebanon. I think few other ministers in the world have gone as close as I have to the blue line. I met with incredibly brave representatives of the Lebanese Red Cross, young people who had, in many cases, given up their lives in order to try and make sure that they could minimise the harm that was coming to southern communities. I was so upset to see further strikes on them since I met them. I am proud of our support to them. I utterly condemn the attacks upon them.
Simon Hall.
Mr. Speaker, it's a tragic perversity that the actions of both Hezbollah and Hamas actually hurt and harm the interests and the safety of those who they purport to act on behalf of.
What about Israel?
But several years ago, former Israeli Prime Minister Barak described Israel as being the villa in the jungle. Last week, with cross-party colleagues, I was in Israel. It's becoming increasingly evident that the Israeli government's actions are rendering it both a rogue and a pariah state, oblivious to international and US pressure and opinion. That in turn is, of course, making Israel herself far less secure. Apart from words, which are welcome, what can the government do? Could I suggest an expansion and deepening of sanctions? Because that will hit them where it is needed and may refocus attention.
Madam Deputy Speaker, there are strong views held right across the House on the questions of the Middle East, but I want to pay tribute to those on the benches opposite who have shifted their position in recent years. The British government, while I have been the Middle East Minister, has indeed made very significant policy decisions, both existing sanctions, and I know the honourable gentleman will understand why I don't go further on the question of sanctions, but I am the first British minister from this dispatch box to announce sanctions on Israeli ministers, and I recognise what a Rubicon that is, and I recognise also that I have been supported in doing so by voices on the opposite benches, as well as, of course, by my many honourable friends behind me. I recognise the gravity of what is happening in the Middle East. We will continue to take the steps that we have been, responding with the urgency that is required, and I hope the House will permit me if I say I felt at the point at which I announced the recognition of the State of Palestine that I was speaking for the whole House, not just the government.
John MacDonald.
Could I just take 30 seconds, Madam Deputy Speaker, to associate myself with the remarks by the Speaker with regard to Sir Alan Hazelhurst. Sir Alan was in the chair when I seized the mace and he expelled me from the chamber, but he did it with such good grace we became firm friends for ever since. So I send my condolences to his wife. As the Minister knows, I'm Secretary of the NUJ Parliamentary Group. We're now experiencing in Lebanon exactly what we saw in Gaza, the targeting and murder of journalists. When he was there in April, Amal Khalil, the famous woman journalist, was hit by an Israeli strike, and then the Red Cross ambulance that went to assist her was hit as well. And as a result of that, the Lebanese Prime Minister has made it quite clear that these are war crimes. So could I ask that the government joins with others now in collecting the evidence of these war crimes so that we can take action against those Israeli ministers that have actually perpetrated these war crimes against the Lebanese people, just as they did against the Palestinians?
I'm familiar with the incident that my right honourable friend describes, and I pay tribute to his work on these issues right across the world. It is appalling that journalists in Lebanon reporting on developments in the south have been struck in this way. We made interventions in the United Nations following some of these assaults on journalists, both in Lebanon and in Israel, and we will continue to press these points.
Brian Matthew.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With the world on fire, with war and climate change, with diseases such as Ebola stalking Africa again, will the government reconfirm its commitment to returning aid spending to 0.7% GNI and not cutting it beyond 0.3% GNI?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we've discussed these issues on a number of occasions, and the Foreign Secretary and the Prime Minister have set out why we had to take the difficult decisions that we have, but I'd just like to assure the House that we have protected Lebanon from those cuts, and that is why we are in the position that we are of being one of the largest humanitarian donors to Lebanon in the world.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I start by paying tribute to the dogged determination of the Minister to get this issue right, which is shared by many of us in this side of the House. Madam Deputy Speaker, I think I've said prayers every time throughout this crisis when there has been an abuse of human rights, not just in Lebanon, but when Hamas took the hostages, when innocent Palestinians have been killed, when villages have been threatened, when settlements have been, violence has been done. Now, the IDF and the Israeli government sits at many times about that. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, I fear I am running out of prayers to make. Can I ask the Minister, beyond the moral outrage we rightly express in this House, what more will it take for a British government to stand up for sanctions and further action that demonstrates to the world and the people in Lebanon and in Gaza and in the West Bank that we get it and we will take the action necessary to stand up for international law, human rights and their freedoms?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank my honourable friends. I hope I have, through his, he describes some of my work in gracious terms, and I'm grateful. I hope in Britain's sustained commitment to these issues in Lebanon that we have demonstrated that we understand the gravity of what is going on here. We will remain deeply engaged in these questions. I have been in contact with the Lebanese Foreign Minister, the Lebanese President, American counterparts. We have raised these issues with the Israeli government as well. We will continue to do so.
Matt Pritchard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I join with the Chairman, just getting back into place, Chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, for her comments on seeking to support capacity building in the Lebanese army? That's absolutely right. Can I also thank the Minister and join him in recognising the courage of the President and other ministers in the Lebanese government, particularly their public condemnation of Hezbollah and even indirectly Iran. Could he confirm that it is the view of the British government that not all Shia, those that follow the Shia tradition of Islam, both in indeed Lebanon and Iran, necessarily support Hamas or Hezbollah or the evil Iranian regime? And can I put on the record my condemnation of both Hezbollah and Iran, who basically have caused this latest conflict in Lebanon? Israelis should be able to live in peace without fear of being bombed by drones or missiles. That's absolutely clear. But does he share the view of the French envoy to the United Nations that Israel needs to learn the lessons of its occupation of Lebanon in the year 2000? And also, does he recognise the words of Danny Danon, as you will know, the Israeli envoy to the UN, when he says that Israel is not seeking to expand the conflict or retain territory in Lebanon? If that is indeed the position and policy of the Israeli government, that is welcome, but it does seem at odds with some of the public utterances of the current Israeli Prime Minister.
Minister.
I completely agree with the honourable gentleman about the Shia of whether it's Lebanon, Iraq, Iran, indeed Pakistan. Overwhelmingly, Shia communities want peace and human rights like everybody else. This is a small, unrepresentative part of Lebanon that is funded and supported by Iran, and it is bringing the Lebanese into terrible, terrible difficulties. I want to return to the very important point that he makes, though, about the intentions of the Israeli government. If this is a counter-terrorism operation, I can see absolutely no justification for raising the Israeli flag over Beaufort Castle. We want to see Lebanese Hezbollah disarmed. That cannot possibly involve such a flagrant violation of the sovereignty of a neighbour.
Apsana Begum.
Deputy Speaker, for years now it's been reported that Israel has been using white phosphorus munitions against civilian targets in South Lebanon's Bekaa Valley. Alongside reports from Human Rights Watch and Amnesty, UNIFIL even reported that UN peacekeepers in Lebanon were injured by white phosphorus munitions. The Minister has confirmed to me previously that the government is aware of these reports, and the government knows that the use of white phosphorus as an incendiary weapon in populated areas is strictly prohibited. And yet this is just one of thousands of examples of Israel tearing up the laws around war. Can the Minister explain whether the UK's joint agreement signed in 2020 on military cooperation with Israel is still in place, and if so, why?
Minister.
Madam Speaker, to be clear about the position, I think my honourable friend refers to the 2020 Israel-UK roadmap, which is suspended. But in relation to the very important question she raises about arms exports, as I've said to this House on a number of occasions, we take our obligations under international humanitarian law incredibly seriously. That's why we conducted the review that we did when we became the government, and why we took the action that then followed, which has been discussed in this chamber on a number of occasions.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I'm sure the Minister understands that there can be no sustainable ceasefire for as long as there exists in Lebanon an Iranian terrorist proxy that has as its war aim the complete, final and irrevocable destruction of the State of Israel and the Jews that live there. So we are faced, are we not, with trying to mitigate some of that action by this terrorist organisation. Would he agree with me that the only viable way of doing that, given the situation, is to do everything in our power to strengthen the Lebanese army, which he will know is a credible organisation, and to support the UN Secretary-General in his stated intention of renewing UNFIL and making sure that it is fit for purpose rather than simply as an observer, as is currently the case.
Minister.
I very strongly agree with the honourable gentleman. It is the Lebanese armed forces. In the end, that must be the force that disarms Hezbollah and ends the threats, both to Lebanese and Israelis, that emanates from that malign group. And so I completely support the Lebanese armed forces and agree with what he says. Of course, UNIFIL is a subject of discussion in the Council, I think, in the coming months, and we will be playing our full part to try and ensure that it can contribute as much as possible. But in much of the discussion around Lebanon, there is often a focus on the international elements. We have to be clear that the Lebanese government, the Lebanese armed forces and the Lebanese president must have control over the use of force in Lebanon, and that is the position of the British government.
Tony Vaughan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And while we rightly focus on the grave situation in Lebanon, the wider region is seeing an increasing pattern of British nationals being arbitrarily detained and used as leverage by countries including Iran. Madam Deputy Speaker, in the light of the news yesterday that Craig and Lindsay Foreman have had their appeal dismissed by the Iranian courts, and given their ongoing hunger strike in Evin prison, I think Craig is on his 27th day and Lindsay is on her 18th day, which is to protest against their conditions and ongoing detention. What further specific steps are the government taking to secure consular access? And is the government now prepared to condemn their detention as arbitrary, use international levers against Iran for hostage taking, and show Iran that they cannot keep taking British citizens hostage as pawns in their own games?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, as I was clear yesterday in response to the news that my honourable friend refers to, their continued detention is unjustified and appalling. My honourable friend has been a doughty advocate for his constituents in this matter. I will continue to meet with him directly and with them on all of these questions. The behaviour of Iran is not solely in relation to British nationals, though of course that must be our focus in this chamber, but it is part of a much wider pattern of detentions which appear to have absolutely no justification of any kind, and it's a pattern which extends far beyond Europe as well. We condemn it. It is completely erosive of any trust in Iran, and I have made that point clearly and repeatedly to the Iranian authorities.
Sir John Hayes.
Madam Speaker, in referring the House to my entry in the Register of Interests, I commend this Minister for both visiting Lebanon in April, for his continuing dialogue with the very good new ambassador here, and for our ambassador there. He will know that the Lebanese people deserve to be freed from fear. from persistent uncertainty, from perpetual hostility, and from permanent doubt. The only way of that happening, as he said, is to support the Lebanese government and the armed forces. We do so already. But to endorse the point made by my honourable friend from South West Wiltshire, will he look at what further steps can be made to communicate that support within Lebanon? The worry people have, and I think shared across this chamber, is that sadly, tragically, the Lebanese people will come to believe that Hezbollah is defending them, where in fact it's doing anything but, it's endangering them. So what further steps can be made to reassure the Lebanese people of what he's told the House today?
I thank the honourable gentleman and my Lincolnshire neighbour for his kind words and for his attention to these matters. I take the challenge that there is a completely untrue narrative that is promoted, the idea that either Lebanese Hezbollah or Iran itself is a protector of Lebanon is patently and completely untrue. Iran's influence in Lebanon over many years has been malign, it has undermined the sovereignty of the country, and it's harmed the interests of its people. And I take his challenge, and I'll return to him on it, on what more we can do to make sure both our support and the malign nature of Iranian influence within the country.
Imran Hussain.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the reality is, Israel continues to rip to shreds every last line of the international rules-based order. It continues with its illegal land grabs, illegal settlements, war crimes and genocide in Gaza, and is now breaching the ceasefire agreement with illegal military action in Lebanon. 55 children have been killed and 212 injured in Lebanon since the ceasefire began on April the 16th. So I say to the Minister, he will have seen the strength of feeling in this place, and I seriously ask him this question: how many more children must be killed in Lebanon and Gaza before his government stops with the empty condemnations and takes real action?
Minister.
I recognise my honourable friend's engagement and commitment to these issues. I would just gently say back to him, I have met the children displaced by this escalation. We have taken urgent steps to very significantly increase the support that is being provided to them. We have done everything that we can privately and publicly in the way that I have described to the Chamber over the course of the afternoon to try and make sure that there is a genuine, meaningful ceasefire that holds, that does not lead to the loss of life, whether children or otherwise. We will continue to do that. We have changed very significantly our posture towards Lebanon within the last few months. As I said earlier, we are now one of the largest humanitarian donors. I have myself handed over equipment to the Lebanese in order to try and ensure that they can control the south. That is not to say that that progress has been uniform. In fact, it is very clear, as my honourable friend will have heard, that I am acknowledging how much worse the situation has got. But we will continue to play our full role here at the United Nations and with our counterparts in the region to try and bring about a genuine and meaningful ceasefire.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Israeli Minister Ben-Gvir said in the last few days on social media, electricity must be cut off, the Zahrani must be seized and intensive warfare resumed. And last week, flattening Netanyahu, flatten it again and target the suburbs. This indiscriminate targeting of Lebanese people shows what the Israelis are really trying to do. So will the Minister agree that the time has finally come for a full ban on all arms to Israel?
I'm almost reluctant, Madam Deputy Speaker, to talk any more about that Minister from the dispatch box. I am glad, I'm afraid, that I sanctioned him in the way that I described earlier. We were amongst the first countries to do so. I'm glad to see that others are now taking similar steps. That minister, whose name I don't really want to say again in this chamber, brings Israel nothing but harm. He undermines their position in the world. He brings even Israel's friends into a position of disgust at his actions.
Andy MacDonald.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I share the Minister's condemnation of the murderous attacks upon Kuwait Airport this morning. I'm sure you'll share with me condemnation of the murder of 2 more health workers in Lebanon this morning at the hands of the IDF. And he referred to the Israelis ordering the war crime of forcible displacement of around 1 million Lebanese south of the Zerani and Litani rivers, with 3,500 killed and tens of thousands injured by their actions. And this reflects the early stages of the Gaza war, when they told Gazans to move south of the Wadi River. Since then, estimates of 70,000 killed and 170,000 injured. Indeed, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz explicitly said the destruction of villages in southern Lebanon would proceed, in accordance with the model of Bet Hanun and Rafah in Gaza. So with growing Israeli attacks in the West Bank, in addition to that, when will the government act on this consistent pattern of war crimes purposefully pursued by the Israeli government and take action to pressure the Israeli state to stop its military action, end arms sales, stop F-35 supplies, impose sanctions, utilise the Sanctions and Anti-Money Laundering and Proceeds of Crime Acts? There are tools at his disposal. When will he use them fully?
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we've talked about the F-35 programme at some length before, and I'm usually happy to go back into that debate, but I would prefer, given my honourable friend has given me the opportunity, just to comment a little bit further about the impact of displacement in Lebanon, which is rather different in some respects from the impact of displacement in Gaza. As the Chamber and many honourable and right honourable members know, Lebanon has a complicated multi-confessional balance within the country. Displacing a quarter of the population, often long distances, has a very significant impact on the stability of the country. Displacement, forced displacement, is exactly as he says, a war crime, but to displace so many people will also have a very deleterious impact on the stability of Lebanon in the long term. So it is all the more important that this practice is reversed and that we return to a genuine and sustainable ceasefire. One small note of optimism, if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker. We welcome the talks that the United States have been convening between Israel and Lebanon, including talks today, and we want to see them progress.
Sammy Wilson.
Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I draw attention to the declaration that I've made in the Register of Interests? Hezbollah have made South Lebanon into an armed camp and a massive arms dump in which they store rockets, drones, etc., and have used them to attack Israeli towns, cities, kill civilians, cause billions of pounds worth of damage, and displaced a large part of the population. It's not disproportionate, would the Minister agree, for any government to seek to take action to defend its own citizens, and that can only be done by going into the area, where the enemy is firing its weapons and causing that destruction. And would you not agree with me that the real answer is Israel doesn't want to occupy Lebanon, it doesn't want to take over territory. The real answer is to eliminate and disarm Hezbollah, and then there will be real peace in that area.
Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, perhaps the honourable member has been to southern Lebanon, as I have recently. I can assure him it is not an arms dump. It is a place with people living, with children living, with people displaced. I saw for myself villages flattened literally to the ground. There is no military operation that ends up flattening entire villages to less than the height of this dispatch box, which does not end up prompting the question, what on earth were you trying to do with that operation? It is absolutely clear that Lebanese Hezbollah must be disarmed. They continue to strike northern Israeli communities. That is absolutely and completely unacceptable. The responsibility to prevent that must be the Lebanese government, it must be the Lebanese armed forces, and we must see a genuine and sustainable ceasefire. Of course, the Israeli government will react with understandable, total fury if their nationals are targeted from another state. But as one of the honourable gentlemen on the other benches said, Israel has attempted to occupy southern Lebanon for long periods of time before, and it did not lead to safety amongst northern communities in Israel. We must all support the Lebanese government to do what is necessary, which is disarm Hezbollah, but we must ensure that civilians in southern Lebanon are protected in doing so.
Richard Bergen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Israel's bombing of Lebanon has seen yet more war crimes. It's incredibly dangerous for the people there. It's also a direct threat to achieving a peace process between the US and Iran in a war that's killing people over there and driving up the cost of living for people here. So I ask the Minister again, how many more countries does Israel have to bomb before the government imposes widespread sanctions as they rightly did on Russia?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we've covered sanctions already in these exchanges. I just want to slightly correct my honourable friend. It is not what will protect Lebanon is not Iran or its talks with the United States of America. It is the Lebanese government and the Lebanese armed forces. The process happening in Washington today between the government of Lebanon and the government of Israel, and the efforts of the United States, which I have welcomed, in seeking to ensure that there is no further violence of this kind. I think the President of the United States said earlier this week, the guns must fall silent, and I agree with him.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Isn't the issue that Israel's occupation and destruction of so much life in Lebanon at the present time is a continuation of their genocide in Gaza, is a continuation of their continued occupation of the West Bank and arming settlers to commit violent acts against Palestinian villages and steal their land and their crops? Isn't the real issue that Israel is allowed to get away with it because the rest of the world provides Israel with the wherewithal to do it? Will you be very clear, what is the British government's military relationship with Israel at the moment? Are we supplying weapons? Are we supplying parts for the F-35? Are we sharing intelligence information? Are we assisting on their military occupation of those three areas that I've just mentioned?
We are not, Madam Deputy Speaker. I've set out to the House on a number of occasions. The steps that we took were to ensure that no bombs, no bullets were being sold to Israel or were being licensed to be sold to Israel by UK companies. That is because of concerns that we had about their conduct in Gaza. That applies to Gaza, that applies to the West Bank, and it applies to Lebanon. He asked me specifically about the F-35 programme, so let me reiterate to the House. The UK does not permit licences for direct sales of F-35 parts to Israel, but we are part of the global F-35 supply chain, and we do contribute to the global spares pool in which Israel may indeed be able to buy parts produced in the UK, but as part of a global arrangement which we are a part, which is vital to our security, the security of our friends and allies like Ukraine, and that continues to be our policy.
Paul Wall.
Deputy Speaker, the US service Axios reported that this week President Trump held a phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu, a direct phone call in which he said that Netanyahu was, and I quote, effing crazy for escalating his military action in Lebanon, killing thousands of innocent civilians, adding, "You'd be in prison if it weren't for me." But Netanyahu is also continuing to inflict death and misery on the people of the West Bank and Gaza, as we've heard many members report today. So isn't it time that the UK government showed that it shared the anger, the global anger and disgust at Israel's attempt to act with impunity by imposing our own sanctions on illegal Israeli settlements in the occupied territories of Palestine?
Minister.
I have seen the reports that my honourable friend mentions about the language used by the President of the United States in his call with the Prime Minister. I think he's confirmed it this morning. The language is unparliamentary, Madam Deputy Speaker, so I won't repeat it, but I very much sympathise with the frustration that the President feels for the Prime Minister of Israel and the conduct of the Israeli government in Lebanon. And I reiterate my calls in support of his that we must have the guns falling silent and a genuine and sustainable ceasefire.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Minister, as always, for his answers. An incredibly difficult portfolio the Minister has, and can I say this, Israel isn't perfect. I'm not perfect. The Minister's not perfect. Nobody in this House is perfect. I think that's where following Hezbollah's sustained barrage of missiles and rockets targeting Israel towns and cities, the murder of Israeli civilians and soldiers, will the Minister set out the government's position on whether it fully recognises and supports the IDF's actions in Lebanon as a necessary and proportionate response to eliminate this terrorist threat and to protect Israeli civilians? Surely, Minister, that is the duty of any government, to protect its people and stop terrorists killing their people.
I regret to disagree with the courteous honourable gentleman on this question. I do not think that what Israel is doing is proportionate for all the reasons that we've set out in the course of the discussion this afternoon. He is absolutely right that it is the responsibility of a government to protect their people. That applies to Lebanon as much as it does Israel, and that is why the talks in Washington today are so important.
James Nash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Minister, I asked the Prime Minister on the 2nd of March what steps the UK was taking to prepare for the targeted stabilisation and humanitarian efforts in Lebanon and Yemen if the Iranian regime changed. Well, while we are all in support of the dismantling of Hezbollah, the Iranian regime, of course, hasn't changed, but the Israeli government has nonetheless stoked regional instability through these wholly disproportionate attacks. Will the Minister therefore condemn the actions being taken by the Israeli forces, but also reassure my constituents in Rushcliffe that nothing is off the table, including sanctions, further arms and trade embargoes, when it comes to the UK's responses to such actions?
I thank my honourable friend for his question. We keep all of these questions under review and we recognise the magnitude of events in the Middle East. I'll decline to enter into the hypothetical question, but obviously events in the Middle East, whether it's in Iran or Lebanon, are a real concern, I know, to constituents right across the country, to my constituency of Lincoln, and I know in Rushcliffe too.
Ayub Khan.
You, Madam Deputy Speaker, we all know in this House that words have consequences, words spoken in this House or outside indeed. And when we remind ourselves of the Prime Minister's comments about vital supplies being cut was fair game, when we look at the lack of criticisms, the lack of the call out of war crimes that we all witness, the specific mention of war crimes, that terminology is not being used by ministers of this government. And then recently, the suspension or banning of Cenk Uygur from entering the United Kingdom, someone even Piers Morgan holds in high regard. It's words and actions like that that embolden Netanyahu and his right-wing government. Does he recognise that it must be words that need to change as well as sanctions?
Words do matter, Madam Deputy Speaker, and it has been a long-standing principle of this government and indeed previous governments that it's not for ministers to say what crimes are, it's for courts to find. And that's why we haven't used the particular formulation that he would like. But I think absolutely nobody in the chamber could be under any doubts about the extent of criticism that both I and other ministers of the government have delivered in relation to Israeli conduct, whether it's in Lebanon or in Gaza. That hasn't just been criticism in words, it has been concrete actions, including sanctions against Israeli ministers, as I set out earlier in my question. We have a very delicate situation in the Middle East, which we seek to navigate in the best interests of the region and of the United Kingdom. There are many people's praise that I seek in this chamber, but Piers Morgan, I'm afraid, is not one of them. We have got to make difficult decisions in a serious way, and that is what we try to do each day in and day out.
Richard Baker.
Speaker, the attacks by Hezbollah must cease, but the wholly disproportionate response in Lebanon by the Israeli military is bringing untold suffering to those least able to bear the consequences, for women and children, for older and disabled people. What can UK ministers do alongside international partners and agencies to ensure humanitarian support and aid reaches those who've been left in desperate straits as a result of the actions of Israeli forces who are responsible for serious violations of human rights and international law?
I thank my honourable friend for the question and his commitment to the region and developments in the Middle East. We are proud that we are now one of the largest humanitarian donors in Lebanon. Access for that aid has not been impeded within Lebanon, but as some of my honourable friends behind me have already set out, there has been terrible incidents involving the death of aid workers, very, very committed young Lebanese who are doing their absolute best to help people in their own country, and they must stop.
Iqbal Mohammed.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the illegal actions of Hezbollah and Iran must be condemned, but so must the illegal actions of Israel. Israel has carried out 11,518 attacks in Lebanon between the 2nd of March to the 11th of May, with over 3,000 further estimated attacks since. Israel has bombed and destroyed or heavily demolished over 100 villages. As of yesterday, Israel has injured 10,577 people and killed 3,468 people, including 128 health workers. Israel has attacked and damaged 17 hospitals and damaged and destroyed 3 hospitals. It employs double and triple attacks on civilians. So, please may I ask the Minister, will this Labour government do anything meaningful to stop Israel's thirst for blood of innocent civilians, its insatiable appetite for the most barbaric violence, its Gazification of Lebanon and the wider Middle East? And does the UK support or condemn Netanyahu's declared plan for a greater Israel?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think we've got to be a bit careful when we describe the government of Israel. I don't think that they have a thirst for blood for innocent civilians. I think we've got to be a bit more careful with our language in this chamber. That sounds to me like it echoes anti-Semitic tropes. So I want to just take a little bit of issue with the question that I was asked. I have taken clear steps in relation to Lebanon and indeed in relation to events in Palestine. We will continue to do so, but I do think we've got to be careful with our language in here.
Joe Morris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I just want to echo comments about the need for Hezbollah to cease their attacks on civilians, but it's clear that the tactics being used by the IDF deliberately echo and mirror the tactics being used in Gaza and in the West Bank: forced displacement, deliberate targeting of hospitals and other healthcare facilities, and intentional targeting of journalists to try and blind the world to the crimes that are taking place. Does the Minister agree with me that there is a clear need for further and deeper sanctions against the individuals and organisations responsible in the Israeli government?
I thank my honourable friend for the question. I know he's been long committed to these issues and that he has constituents in the region who have strong views as well, and I'm glad for his continued engagement. I won't provide further comments on sanctions from this dispatch box for reasons that people will understand, but we will keep all measures under review as the situation evolves.
Dr. Scott Arthur.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Last week, France sanctioned Itmar Ben-Gvir, and that was almost a year to the day since the Minister made the same announcements from the dispatch box here. So I do thank him for the leadership he's been showing over the past months and years. And he's right not to pick a side in this war other than the Lebanese government, because both Iran's Hezbollah and Netanyahu is just showing a disregard for civilian life right across the region. But people and organisations in Denver South West want to be reassured that if a ceasefire is established, that the aid that we're putting into that region is sufficient and is scalable. And secondly, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Minister started off by talking about Iran. So I do have to mention the fact that in Iran, we're seeing the industrialisation of the death penalty against their own people, often young people who have simply been out protesting. And I know he has raised concern about this last year, I think November it was. Is there more we can do? I know it's a really difficult situation.
I thank my honourable friend for the kind words he says about the leadership we've shown in relation to these issues. He's absolutely right. And let me just reiterate to the House our total opposition to the death penalty everywhere. But what has happened in Iran, particularly since the protests in January, has been an absolutely awful cracking down on their own people. They have imposed very significant restrictions on communications. So some of the detail of that crackdown are not as accessible to us now as they once were. I have grave fears about how Iranians are being treated within Iran, and we will continue to monitor this closely and raise it with the force that he would expect with the Iranian authorities.
And the final question, John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I associate myself with the words of the Minister in strongly condemning the Iranian attack on Kuwait airport and also the continuing attacks by Hezbollah on Israeli civilians. But it was disturbing over recent weeks and days to see the IDF appearing to engage in a mission to seize land that does not belong to them, exemplified by the hoisting of the Israeli flag over the Beaufort Castle, presumably as a symbol of conquest. Will my honourable friend join me in condemning that act and reiterating once again that international law applies to Hezbollah and applies to the government of Israel?
Madam Deputy Speaker, it does. And of course, flags are much less important than the horrific loss of life that we have discussed over the course of this afternoon. But it is hard to draw a conclusion that the Israeli government is taking steps simply to deal with the terrorist organisation when they take one of the most historic sites in Lebanon with a long history of occupation by the Israelis and raise the Israeli flag in exactly the way he described. So I join with him in my condemnation.
And that concludes the urgent question. I'll just give a few moments for the front benches to swap over.